a lot of the policies that we have put in place has kind of helped lead the devastation in Venezuela, and we've sort of set the stage for where we are arriving today. This particular bullying and the use of sanctions to eventually intervene and make regime change really does not help the people of countries like Venezuela, and it certainly does not help, and it's not in the interest of the United States.
That's her take. The Trump administration fires back at Ilhan Omar, the congresswoman, for suggesting that the United States is at least partly to blame for the crisis that's unfolding in Venezuela. Here is the Vice President, Mike Pence.
The congresswoman doesn't know what she's talking about. Nicolas Maduro is a socialist dictator who's taken what was once one of the most prosperous nations in this hemisphere and brought it literally to a level of deprivation and oppression and poverty that we have never seen.
Strong words there from the Vice President. The freshman Democrat tweeting a short time ago, women of color have heard this before. Instead of we disagree, it's she doesn't know what she's talking about. They have to make us feel small, she says. This from an administration that thinks climate change is a Chinese hoax. Joining me now, Republican Congressman Dan Crenshaw of Texas. Congressman, good to have you with us today. Thank you for being here tonight. What do you make of all that?
Well, her opinion is one that is not based on facts or reality. Okay, I've been going to Venezuela a long time. My family actually used to live in Caracas, and I've traveled there a number of times. I've watched these policies ruin the country. It's not U.S. policy, and notice she didn't give an example because she doesn't have any, but what's actually happened is through price controls and nationalization of private industry, you've ruined an economy. And we have 100 years of examples to show for this. When you put in these kind of socialist policies, it destroys a country. It happens over and over again. People starve. That is what's happening right now. These failed ideas that keep bubbling up. And it's a real shame to see that we have members of Congress actually defending them and always going back to this. It's the U.S.'s fault. It's always America's fault. And if you disagree with me, you're disagreeing with me because of my identity. That's basically what she said in that tweet. And that's really cheap. That's a really cheap shot to take.
Let me ask you this, because there's discussion that the military option's on the table. We hear that all the time. You, of course, have fought for our country. You're a Navy SEAL, former Navy SEAL. I don't think you can say former, right? You're always a Navy SEAL. And we thank you for your service. But is it worth, and Tulsi Gabbard was on the other night, she's running for president, she said it's not worth putting American lives on the ground for Venezuela and the mess that they have created for themselves in some ways.
Yeah, it's an ongoing situation. I don't think we should take that option off the table. I would agree with Tulsi Gabbard at this point. I don't think we want to put troops on the ground. I'm not sure Juan Guaido and his followers want American troops on the ground. But we don't want to remove that from the table either. We want to remove that option. We don't want to give any sense of emboldenment to the Maduro regime right now. We want to keep supporting Juan Guaido and his movement and hope that they can be...
Do you think he's going to prevail, Guaido?
I mean, it's clear that he has the support of the people. It's clear that that people want their freedom, they want Maduro gone, and they want change. And I think, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that that takes place.
So we played a little clip before you came on of a protester who was yelling at you at an appearance that you made. Let's play that for everybody at home.
TPUSA is for Nazis, and you should be ashamed of your service in Afghanistan. It was an illegal war of aggression by the United States. You should be ashamed of yourself, not proud of your service.
If you have to call somebody a Nazi, it's a good indicator that you haven't thought through your argument very well.
I don't know how I follow that.
That was fun. At least we had a little bit of... That was,
okay.
But get more creative with your insults, man. Like Nazi, come on. All right.
It was a good day.
Incredible, right?
I only got called a Nazi once.
He was all fired up. Yeah. He was all fired up.
Yeah, he left very emotional. He didn't stay for the debate, but
no,
to be fair, that was only one incident like that through that whole very good experience. Actually, I love going to college campuses and just putting myself out there for students. Reaching young people is the most important thing we can do. But what you saw there is a real problem with American discourse right now. We always go to the first insult that we can think of, and on the left, what do they go to immediately? It's calling you a Nazi. This is really problematic, both in terms of discourse, but also in terms of how these kids are getting educated. but also what it does to diminish the word Nazi. When you call someone a racist all the
Absolutely.
time or call someone a Nazi all the time,
means nothing.
It means nothing
Becomes-
anymore, and it's getting ridiculous.
Dan Crenshaw, Congressman, thank you. It's always good to see you tonight. Thanks for
See
being
ya.
here.
Thanks.
And to try and play the gender card, the overall victim card, okay, I'm a woman. And Representative Omar, as someone who has followed that country and its politics and its economic challenges for the last 20 years, back when Hugo Chavez first came to power, I can tell you, Ms. Omar, that you do not know what you're talking about. Joining me right now, former Army Intelligence Special Ops soldier Brett Velikovich. Good to have you back. She really, I mean, I say this because it's frustrating when people spout off very ignorant comments and they have no sense of what's actually going on the ground there. They have no sense of what the last 20 years have been like for that country that was once a shining example of what could be in many ways in Latin America, you know, the highest per capita income. And now you look at what socialism and Hugo Chavez did to that country that should have all kinds of wealth, Brett. I've been to the Orinoco region, you know, where that oil is. It could be bigger than Saudi Arabia, as if they could get it out of the ground. But they can't.
Exactly.
Because they got a bunch of socialists that don't know how to get out of their own way. And that has now contributed to this massive political turmoil. But what do you think about her? Now trying to say it's all about me. I'm the victim here.
Well, Trish, first let me tell you that the deafening silence from leading Democrats on the Venezuelan issue is just striking to me. Okay, not one single 2020 Democrat, to my knowledge, has basically come out and called for socialist dictator Maduro to step down, even as he continues murdering people in his own streets. And Representative Omar is taking that to the extreme by saying how somehow we're to blame for that.
I'm going to give Joe Biden credit. Joe Biden has said we need to stand with Juan Guaido. And I think there's a few other prominent ones too. But I think this is the extremism in the left right now. These Ilhan Omar types,
you're
Bernie
absolutely
Sanders.
Right. You're absolutely right about the extremism. And Ilhan Omar, you know, she should be embarrassed by her recent comments about Venezuela. It's embarrassing to the House Foreign Affairs Committee that she serves on. She doesn't deserve to have a seat there and a voice there, in my opinion, because her lack of knowledge about foreign affairs continues to surprise me. I got to tell you, especially as a refugee who fled Somalia after that country descended into chaos in the 1990s, you know, she should know a lot better. Okay, I spent a lot of time on the ground in Somalia, and I got to tell you, one of the things we learned from history there was that the reason that was a failed state was because of an organization known as the Somali Revolutionary Socialist Party, which was created by the Soviet Union during the Cold War and enacted some of the same socialist policies then that had been enacted by the Maduro regime in Venezuela. And so literally a socialist regime was the reason that her family had to flee that country. And the fact is that without U.S. involvement right now, particularly in Somalia, with U.S. involvement behind the scenes, that country is slowly, finally coming back because of the political, diplomatic, and financial, incentives that we're giving, which is the same thing we are trying to do right now in Venezuela.
Look, I mean, Brett, I think the reality is some people just want to blame the world's problems on the United States of America, and it's a shame because, you know, she's living the American dream. She just doesn't realize it.
It's a terrible situation. It's like an incredible thing because they have mortgaged their oil almost to the maximum, but we'll see what happens there. You know, you wonder what happens to, that's called Foreclosureville, USA, I guess. But China's in, and
except not USA, but China's there, Russia's there, and Cuba as well.
When you think about it, though, what they have, what has to be done, you really do. Essentially, it's called a country foreclosure.
Country foreclosure. President Trump speaking exclusively to me about the dire economic situation in Venezuela and making, I would say, a pretty interesting analogy. A country in foreclosure. Meanwhile, as the country struggles to stabilize, there are private investors in the United States that are hoping to put some money to work in Venezuela. My next guest is one of those investors trying to see the country through to a better place. He has helped restructure governments all around the world, from Iraq to Argentina to Greece to Ecuador, Liberia, Nicaragua, and even some banks in Kazakhstan. Greylock Capital's Hans Hume says this isn't as hard as it looks. This ain't no North Korea, and Donald Trump is the one that can get it done. Hans, welcome to the show. Good to have you back.
Thanks, Trish.
All right, so you're saying he just needs to be himself and
well,
he can get it done?
You saw it in his interview. I mean, what he was saying is absolutely correct. Venezuela's mortgaged their future. But who do you want it mortgaged to? And they owe the U.S. a lot of money. Now they're getting to the point where they're owing more and more to China and Russia. So if we're going to work with them, I'd rather that they be mortgaged to us and start working to repay us. At the same time, they come back into our economy. I mean, if you want to deal with a humanitarian crisis in Venezuela, make them part of the great capitalist system we have. Don't let them go off to the Russians and the Chinese.
So why do you say he can get that done, though?
Listen, I know it's a complicated situation. There are a lot of people, I'm sure, who are talking to the president. But think about, what did the American people vote for? They voted for a guy who could think outside the box, not act like a normal politician, go with his instincts. And it came through in the interview you had with him. His instincts are spot on. This guy's a deal doer. He can see through how you cut a deal to solve this problem.
So you cut a deal to ensure economic freedom. So a little capitalism in that economy so that then they're doing business with us.
I think, you know, he knows a lot more than I do. He knows who he's supposed to talk to. But honestly, all these chattering boxes, all these people who have all this advice for him, he's got the right instincts. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm not the first person to say this, but Trump should be Trump. He sees this in a way that others don't, and I'm sure he can see a clear path who to negotiate with and how to get this done.
Yeah, let Trump be Trump. I think Corey Lewandowski wrote a book with that title. Here's a little more from the interview with the president earlier in the week, and we talked about what Russia's role in all of this was. Here, listen. Working on getting that, but anyway, he basically said, look, you know, Russia's not looking to get overly involved in Venezuela. And he had a conversation today with Vladimir Putin, and they did talk about Venezuela, and he came out with sort of the same thing that he told us on this show. Here we go.
He is not looking at all to get involved in Venezuela, other than he'd like to see something positive happen for Venezuela. And I feel the same way.
Okay, so that was from an interview he did, was that yesterday? With Catherine Herridge, our own Catherine Herridge, forgive me, today. But what he told me is like, look, you know, I don't think Vladimir Putin wants to be that involved. He's more concerned right now about the Cubans and their involvement. But at the same time, to your point, even if they want to be a little involved, it seems kind of unfortunate that they're going to be winding up with all the oil down there.
If we're not involved and we're backing out completely, they're going to move into the vacuum. The Chinese certainly will, the Russians will. Okay. I do think he's absolutely right. I don't think the Russians have any particular interest in being there full time because they're an energy exporting country. So they may want to keep Venezuela afloat just to be an irritant to us, but I don't think they have any grand scheme to have a foothold there unless we let them. But my point is, Donald Trump is a businessman. He knows how to do deals. We put a lot of pressure on the system, and it was clear from what came out on Tuesday and Wednesday that the U.S. was willing to talk to certain people on the ground in Venezuela, make compromises. But of all the people in this government who can stand up, see where a deal can get done, and do that deal, Donald Trump is the guy.
Okay, so a deal, because, you know, look, America isn't ready to commit military resources to this. I know that a lot of Venezuelans have talked about that and like that idea, but I think the reality at this point in time is that we're not ready to send our troops down there. And that's just the reality. I don't think the president wants to. He says all options are on the table, but, you know, sending troops, that's not fun because people get killed. So Americans get killed. So if you're going to do a deal, and you're not going to send any military down there, what is the opportunity here? I mean, we've sanctioned the heck out of them.
Right.
Can you pull back on some of those in exchange for something else?
I think you need to give people a sense of what kind of a deal is on the table. And, I mean, he's obviously done the first step. He's talked to Vladimir Putin. He's gotten a sense of what their game plan is. I mean, I think the Russians would love to have a bit of a seat at the table, but what does it take to bring Venezuela back into working with American businesses, American oil companies, which is the best thing for Venezuela? You know, again, he knows a lot more than I do, but given how he sees things, what he said to you, it's pretty clear that there's a good opportunity here for the U.S. to come out ahead, for there to be a win. Clearly, it's a very complicated situation.
Easier than North Korea, though? I mean,
I think so. I mean, you know, Venezuela historically has always worked with the United States. They produce the oil, we refined it. I mean, there's a symbiotic relationship. So there's a way to get back there, and my sense is that most of Venezuela wants to come back in and work with the U.S. It's time to figure out who wants to do it and who not. And who better person to do that than the man we elected president for exactly that reason.
You know, having conversations with all the players, the people that are running the military, Juan Guaido, Nicolas Maduro, others that are looking to position themselves. But that's also a lot of work for a president who's got a lot on his plate right now.
I think if he put a call out saying, listen, it's time to sit down and talk, people would listen. It seems like, given the pressure we've put on Venezuela, there are a lot of cracks. It's been pretty clear that we've ratcheted up the sanctions, but we haven't really explained the way to come out of the sanctions. You talk about getting on a plane and going somewhere, but I think that needs to be some sort of a deal. You know, there's an art to doing a deal. So what do you present to the people who need to hear the message? I don't think there's anybody.
Maduro, we've got a great villa for you in the Dominican Republic. And you're going to live very nicely for the rest of your life. Petrino, we got something for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's at a breaking point. Something's got to give. So, you know, do we let this go on for months or years, or do we figure out a compromise?
Not. Yeah, I hope not.
The people of Venezuela, they don't have it in them.
No, they don't. And, you know, and he said this, I mean, they have no food, they have no water, they have no electricity, they have no leadership, they are not safe. You've got Cuban colectivos that are policing the streets of Venezuela, these gangs, these thugs, people are afraid of them. You know, and by the way, totally off topic, but it gives you a new appreciation, I would just say, for the Second Amendment, because you're not allowed to have a gun in Venezuela. But if you work for one of these Cuban colectivos and you're one of the thugs that, you know, get paid on the side to patrol the neighborhoods, you are. So that's
I mean, I think the risk is that if things really break apart there could be a civil war. There could be a lot of bloodshed, and you could have to intervene militarily. My sense is there's probably a deal to be done now that would avoid that. There's a way to head off a lot of human suffering, and frankly, do something that would be really good for the U.S. as well. We're getting a lot of job growth, but you start bringing back the refineries back in the Gulf Coast, that's that many more jobs. Plus, you'll bring oil prices down. I mean, it could set it up politically as a really good win.
It's interesting to think about. And by the way, you know, there are people who say, this is just all about oil. And in some ways, are they right?
You know, I mean, if the oil's going to pump, where do we want it to go? You want to come here, or you want it to go somewhere else?
Yeah, do we want the Russians there? Do we want the Chinese there? Do we want the Iranians there?
It's also better for the Venezuelan people. Yeah. It really is.
I mean, you know, the humanitarian crisis there is an economic and political one. And what better way to help the people than to bring investment?
Absolutely.
Right?
And their oil industry is built on our technology. To resuscitate it, we come in, it turns around really quickly. The Chinese and Russians are working there. It's going to take years to recover if it ever does.
Good point. Hans Humes, full of good points. Let Trump be Trump. Okay.
Yes.
Let's get a deal in Venezuela.